You ever wake up to find your driveway gone? Just vanished overnight like it got Thanos snapped? Straight into HOA heaven? Yeah, that's exactly how my Tuesday started. One minute I'm sipping my morning coffee, thinking about the day ahead, and the next, I'm staring out the kitchen window at this fresh, black jogging path cutting right through my property like a scar. Asphalt where my grandfather's dirt road had been for 40 years, and there she was, Debbie Roston, clipboard in hand, grinning like she just won the HOA Olympics. That smile? It wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile that tells you, I own this now. But guess what? I didn't roll over. No. I rolled out 3 diesel legends that have been fighting since 1962, and they weren't about to back down. If you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare or love a good comeback story, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to follow the fight. My morning had started like any other. 5:30 a.m. coffee brewing, settling in for some remote engineering work. But then came the rumbling. At first I thought it was thunder, but the sky was clear, not a cloud in sight. The sound was coming from my driveway, or at least what used to be my driveway. Through the window I watched in disbelief as workers in orange vests laid down the last strip of that black asphalt ribbon, sealing my grandfather's legacy under layers of tar. The smell of hot tar filled the air, and steam rose like heat waves on a summer sidewalk. That dirt road wasn't just a path. It was a piece of my family's soul, built by my grandfather's own hands when he bought this 5-acre ranch back in '87. Now, gone. And Debbie? She was orchestrating it all, waving an aluminum stick like some drill sergeant decked out in a navy blazer that looked thrift steer chic, clipboard never leaving her side. I couldn't just stand there. I grabbed my grandfather's old John Deere cap and stepped outside, determined to confront this madness head-on. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even though my blood was boiling. "What exactly is going on here?" Debbie glanced up from her clipboard like she held the secrets to the universe. With all the pomp of a courtroom judge, she informed me that my ranch now fell under community jurisdiction. Apparently, this driveway improvement was part of some neighborhood beautification initiative, and I was supposed to just accept it. Meanwhile, the workers kept laying asphalt, acting like this was perfectly normal. I told her I never agreed to any HOA jurisdiction, but she just smiled. This condescending little smile that probably earned her a few slaps in high school, and pulled out a revised community map that conveniently carved my property out of existence. Then came the kicker, a bill for $4,200.00 plus $650.00 monthly maintenance fees. Oh, and no more farm vehicles on what they called a community jogging path. My truck trapped. Just like that, I was legally fenced in, my grandfather's legacy held hostage by bureaucratic nonsense. I watched as workers installed a sign right next to my garage door. Community property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. And then Debbie, with the authority of a traffic cop, whipped out a citation book. "Mr. Hayes, you're being cited $400.00 for improper vehicle storage on community property," she announced, scribbling on carbon paper. I stood there, breathing in the morning air, and feeling the weight of my grandfather's spirit. He always said, "A man's property is sacred. Anyone who tries to take it is just a common thief with fancy paperwork." I touched the brim of his cap, feeling that surge of stubbornness. "Lady," I said quietly, "you just made the biggest mistake of your life. This isn't over." Debbie just laughed like I'd told her a joke. "The HOA has full legal authority," she said. "I suggest you accept the new reality." Then, as if on cue, she turned and walked away, tossing a reminder that any concerns could be submitted in writing to the HOA board. I clenched my fists inside my jacket pockets. The fight had just begun. That evening, I sat in my garage looking at my grandfather's 3 vintage tractors. Big Blue, a 1962 Ford 4000 that could pull down a barn. Green Machine, a 1968 John Deere 3020, precise as a Swiss watch, and Red Beast, a 1971 International 574, roaring like thunder. These weren't just tractors. They were family heirlooms, pieces of American history restored by my grandfather's hands, and now some wannabe HOA dictator wanted to tell me where I could and couldn't drive them. I placed my hand on Big Blue's steering wheel and almost felt my grandfather's presence beside me. Tomorrow, Debbie was going to learn exactly what happens when you mess with a Hayes family tradition. I spent the night planning my counterattack, fueled by a legacy that no asphalt or clipboard could erase. The story was far from over, and I was ready for round 2. By Wednesday morning, the adrenaline from the confrontation had worn off, but the fight was far from over. I spent hours on the phone with Bob Henderson, my old college buddy and the best property lawyer for 3 counties over. "Colton, this smells like fraud from a mile away," Bob said, voice low and serious. He explained how legitimate HOAs don't just declare new jurisdiction overnight and start paving private property without consent. This was classic overreach, a power-hungry wannabe trying to flex authority she didn't have. Bob promised to dig into my original property papers and review everything carefully. It was the first flicker of hope that this nightmare might be undone, but I knew it was only the start of a long haul. Later that day, Frank Miller, my neighbor who'd lived next door for over 4 decades, stopped by with a folder thicker than a Bible. Frank's seen every property transfer and dispute in this area, and his instincts were sharp as a tack. "Son," he said, adjusting his worn baseball hat, "I've been watching Debbie's operation. That map she's waving around, pure fiction. Your grandfather's land was never part of any HOA, and I've got the old surveys to prove it." Frank pulled out yellowed documents, official county surveys dating back decades, and each one reinforced the truth. My land was mine, and Debbie had no real authority here. He told me stories about Debbie sniffing around other rural properties, trying the same power plays, but backing off when folks pushed back. It was clear she was preying on those who didn't know how to fight. Digging deeper into Debbie's background, Frank shared some dirt that explained a lot. 3 divorces, foreclosure on her house 2 years ago, and now living in a double-wide trailer with her elderly mother. Not exactly the profile of someone with clout. Her jealousy of my ranch was obvious. The 5 acres represented everything she'd lost and could never get back. Taking control of pieces of other people's land was her way of feeling powerful again, even if it meant lying and dragging innocent neighbors into her vendettas. I couldn't help but see her as a tragic figure, desperate and broken, trying to claw back some dignity. But her lies? Those I wasn't about to let slide. Not long after, Debbie escalated things. On Thursday morning, I woke up to the sound of a county code enforcement officer knocking on my door. He looked less than thrilled about the visit. "Mr. Hayes," he said, clipboard in hand and attitude worse than the morning traffic, "we've had an anonymous complaint about unauthorized agricultural operations in a residential zone." I knew exactly who had made that complaint, but I kept my cool and let him do his job. After a thorough inspection, the officer admitted, "Everything looks fine here. Whoever called this in was wasting everyone's time." It was a clear message. Debbie was willing to drag government officials into her personal vendetta, hoping to intimidate me through layers of bureaucracy. But I wasn't scared. I was ready. Thursday evening brought even more aggression. Debbie showed up again, this time with a brand new citation book, bright yellow and menacing. "Mr. Hayes, you're being fined $300.00 for unsafe farm equipment storage," she announced like a hawk circling its prey. She claimed my antique tractors were a danger to children and joggers using the community path. I told her plainly, "These tractors are better maintained than most cars on the road, and they're stored on my private property. You have no authority to cite me." That infuriating smile of hers only grew wider as she clicked her pen and said, "The HOA has full enforcement powers within community boundaries. If you don't like it, take it up with the county." The audacity was breathtaking, but it was the moment I decided enough was enough. It was time to stop playing defense and go on the offensive. That night, I went to work on those tractors. I changed the oil, checked the hydraulics, tightened every bolt, each machine a proud testament to American engineering and family heritage. Big Blue was the heavy hitter, raw power ready for serious work. Green Machine was the precision tool, delicate and nimble. Red Beast was the intimidator, loud enough to shake the ground and stubborn enough to get the job done no matter what. As the diesel engines idled and hummed in my garage, it felt like music, a battle anthem. I knew Debbie was watching from her trailer window across the field, binoculars glued to her eyes, completely unaware that she was already losing this war. That week, every morning at exactly 6 a.m., I fired up the tractors, letting their engines roar through the quiet countryside. The sound was a challenge, a statement that the Hayes Ranch was still here, still operational, and not going anywhere. Bob called Friday morning with the results from his legal deep dive. "Colton, your property papers are airtight. Debbie has zero legal authority over your land. That HOA jurisdiction she claims, completely fabricated. This is harassment at best, possibly fraud if she tries to collect fees." Hearing those words was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. The fight wasn't just righteous, it was legally guaranteed. And that night, I sat on the porch, looking at Big Blue's silhouette under the floodlight, gripping my grandfather's cap and feeling the fire of legacy surge through me. Tomorrow, Debbie would find out exactly what Hayes family compliance looks like. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made you believe something big was about to happen. I woke up early, the weight of the fight ahead settling heavy on my shoulders, but there was no room for doubt. This wasn't just about a driveway anymore. It was about respect, heritage, and standing tall against a bureaucracy that thought it could rewrite history with a clipboard and a borrowed authority. I slid on my grandfather's worn John Deere cap and pulled on my gloves, feeling his spirit nudge me forward like an old friend whispering, "This is your moment." I moved to the garage and started Big Blue, that 1962 Ford 4000 growling to life like a beast awakened from a long sleep. The deep, throaty rumble vibrated through the walls and shook the earth beneath my feet. It was more than noise. It was a roar that echoed generations of hard work and resilience. Next came Green Machine, with its smooth hum and sharp precision, joining Big Blue in what sounded like a symphony of defiance. Finally, Red Beast came alive, belching black smoke and rumbling like thunder across the countryside. Together, these machines were a force of nature, announcing to the world that the Hayes Ranch was not surrendering quietly. As I climbed into the driver's seat of Big Blue and slowly rolled onto that freshly paved path, every inch of that tractor reminded me why this fight was worth it. The steel frame beneath my hands carried the sweat and pride of generations, and the sound of the engine was a declaration that no amount of asphalt or authority could bury. I positioned Big Blue right across the jogging path, blocking it completely from property line to property line. The blue paint glistened under the morning sun, and the Ford emblem caught the light like a badge of honor. Neighbors began stirring, faces appearing at windows, footsteps on porches. Curiosity mixed with a spark of excitement. I climbed down and fired up Green Machine, driving it alongside Big Blue. The two tractors stood side by side, a symbol of solidarity and strength. The green paint contrasted beautifully with the blue, forming a patriotic display that felt almost like a rallying flag for anyone who believed in justice and the sanctity of one's land. Voices carried through the air, some laughing, some snapping photos, all watching the spectacle unfold. It wasn't just about blocking a path, it was about drawing a line in the sand and daring anyone to cross it. Red Beast rumbled into position next, completing the blockade with the authority of a machine that had never backed down from a fight. Its exhaust stacks belched black smoke as the engine settled into a steady, powerful rumble. The three tractors created what I like to call the world's most beautiful traffic jam. People gathered, neighbors chatting, kids pointing and laughing, the energy shifting from tension to community celebration. It was exactly the reaction I wanted. The crowd was engaged, invested, and on my side. This was no longer a private battle. It had become a neighborhood event. That's when Debbie arrived, like a storm cloud rolling over a sunny field. She pulled up in her dented Honda Civic, slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows, and marched toward the tractor formation, clutching her clipboard like a weapon. Her face was as red as a summer tomato, her glasses slipping down her nose as she fumed. "Mr. Hayes," she shrieked, loud enough to carry across the county, "you cannot block community property with these The way she said farm machines sounded like she believed I'd parked a herd of rabid cattle in her living room. I sat comfortably in Big Blue's driver's seat, tipping my grandfather's cap with a grin. "Good morning, Debbie," I called out cheerfully, just exercising my property rights on my land according to the original 1987 survey that Bob Henderson reviewed. I gestured proudly at the tractors. "Meet Big Blue, Green Machine, and Red Beast. They'll be permanent residents of this parking area from now on." Debbie's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, her carefully constructed authority crumbling in real time. And the neighbors? They were watching, laughing, and, for the first time in a long while, the scales were falling from their eyes. This was more than a tractor blockade. It was a declaration. The Hayes Ranch stood firm, ready to defend its legacy against any who dared challenge it. The battle had entered a new phase, one where history, pride, and the power of family traditions were roaring louder than any asphalt path ever could. Monday morning hit with the sound of sirens slicing through the quiet. I was jolted awake, heart pounding, to see 3 county sheriff deputies and a detective pounding on my front porch. "Mr. Hayes, we have a search warrant based on reports of suspicious drug activity at this address," the lead officer announced with a grim tone. The words hit me like a punch, but deep down I already knew who was behind this. A petty vendetta escalating into something dangerous. Debbie had crossed the line, weaponizing the law to harass and intimidate. The weight of that reality settled heavy, but I refused to let fear control me. The deputies and detective moved with professionalism, sweeping through every corner of my property, from the spotless garage housing those vintage tractors to the house and acres around. Neighbors gathered at windows and porches, their whispers floating through the air like a thick fog. Despite the invasive search, they found nothing. Just vintage steel, BBQ supplies, and the cleanest property in 3 counties. "Sir, whoever reported this was wasting our time or deliberately trying to cause trouble," the detective said as they packed up. The damage, however, was done. The rumor mill churned, and I knew many in the neighborhood were silently judging before the truth could catch up. Instead of retreating, I decided to flip the narrative. I called everyone I could reach and spread the word. Hayes Ranch was hosting a tractor appreciation BBQ the following Saturday. This wasn't just a party, it was a statement. A chance to show the real story behind the property dispute. I hired a local BBQ food truck, ordered enough supplies to feed a small army, and prepared for a day that would turn Debbie's harassment campaign into a community celebration. If she wanted to play dirty, I was ready to play smart. And louder. The day of the BBQ dawned clear and bright, perfect for an outdoor gathering. By mid-morning, my ranch buzzed with life. Neighbors, friends, and curious strangers showed up to see the tractor blockade that had become local legend. The 3 machines gleamed under the sun, polished and proud. Kids climbed on the tractors, laughing and yelling, while adults swapped stories and snapped photos. Word had spread fast, and by 11 a.m., a TV news crew from Channel 7 had arrived, sensing a story that had it all: rebellion, heritage, and a fight for justice. Just as the community vibe hit a high, Debbie made her grand entrance, flanked by 2 men in cheap suits she claimed were HOA enforcement officers. "This is an illegal gathering on community property," she declared, clipboard waving like a battle standard. "Everyone must disperse immediately or face trespassing charges." The crowd froze, a mix of amusement and disbelief rippling through the crowd. Here was Debbie, armed with fake authority and legal papers that barely held up to the sun. The scene was almost comical, like watching someone try to stop a tidal wave with a teaspoon. The reporter, a sharp young woman named Lisa Martinez, jumped in. "Ma'am, can you explain your legal authority to shut down this private property event?" she asked, microphone thrust forward. Debbie's response was a masterclass in self-destruction. She rattled off claims about enforcement powers and community standards, but failed to show any real documentation. As her voice grew shrill and her face flushed, neighbors started whispering, some shaking their heads, others quietly chuckling. That's when Frank Miller stepped up, folder in hand. "Miss Riston," he announced loudly, "I've lived here for 40 years and I have the property records to prove your claims are lies." He read aloud the official county surveys, confirming that the Hayes Ranch was never part of the HOA. Debbie's facade crumbled in front of the entire neighborhood. Just when it seemed like Debbie might recover, Bob Henderson arrived with the confidence of a man who's won 90% of his property battles. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Bob Henderson, Mr. Hayes' attorney," he declared. "Miss Riston has been operating under fabricated authority. The Real HOA never claimed jurisdiction over this property, and county records back this up." He held up survey maps for everyone to see. The crowd murmured in approval, the tide turning. Debbie, desperate and red-faced, began to rant about conspiracies, waving her clipboard wildly and demanding arrests. Then, in a moment that would be replayed for weeks, she climbed onto Big Blue's hood, jumping up and down, trying to damage the tractor while screaming about property rights. Frank captured every second on his phone, preserving Debbie's meltdown for posterity. As the crowd watched, stunned silence settled in. What had been a nuisance transformed into the laughingstock of the neighborhood. Watching her flail like a toddler at a rodeo, I felt a deep relief, not for me, but for everyone she'd bullied into silence. The weight of her false authority had cracked, and the air felt lighter. Neighbors smiled, strangers nodded, and kids laughed, sensing something important had just happened. The local news crew stayed, broadcasting live as Debbie's tantrum unfolded, sharing with viewers a story of harassment, resilience, and truth finally winning out. The war was far from over, but the victory had begun. Tuesday morning dawned with a sense of quiet vindication. County officials arrived to investigate the false police report Debbie had filed against me, armed with all the evidence we'd gathered, the documents, the testimonies, and the video footage of her harassment. Detective Sarah Morrison, a seasoned investigator with 20 years under her belt, was clear and decisive. "Mr. Hayes, Miss Riston has been charged with filing false reports, harassment, and attempting to collect fees without legal authority," she explained. The weight of that moment wasn't lost on me. This was justice unfolding, slowly but surely. The charges carried serious consequences, potential jail time and heavy fines, and for the first time I saw the end of Debbie's reign of terror. At the same time, the Real HOA board from the neighboring legitimate community stepped forward with an apology. Ms. Riston never had authority to speak on behalf of our organization, their president Michael Chen made clear. They distanced themselves firmly from her actions and even offered assistance to cover the costs of removing the illegal asphalt she'd imposed on my property. But my plan for that patch of blacktop went far beyond simple removal. I wanted something more symbolic, something that would speak to the resilience of a community that refused to be bullied. Wednesday turned into Demolition Day. More neighbors than I could have hoped showed up, bringing tools, snacks, and a collective spirit that felt electric. Frank brought his grandson, a young man whose grit rivaled any seasoned worker. The Peterson family arrived with iced lemonade and sandwiches for the crew. Even old man Donnelly, who hadn't left his porch in years, hobbled over with a crowbar, declaring, "Ain't missing this for the world." The sound of tractors tearing through the asphalt, cracking concrete beneath their heavy wheels, was like music, a battle hymn for reclaiming what was rightfully ours. At one point, someone brought a Bluetooth speaker, blasting Johnny Cash's Folsom Prison Blues, and suddenly, the demolition felt like a celebration, a revolt set to a soundtrack of freedom. As chunks of asphalt shattered and were hauled away, the neighborhood buzzed with stories, horror tales swapped like war stories around a campfire. The cleanup wasn't just physical, it was healing. Kids helped sweep gravel, while parents shared memories and hopes for a better community future. The very act of restoring the dirt road built by my grandfather felt like surgery to remove a cancer. Decades of oppression, lies, and intimidation being torn out piece by piece. By afternoon, every trace of Debbie's illegal paving was gone, the original dirt road restored exactly as it had been. And then came another twist. Frank's old surveys revealed the property boundary extended 10 feet further than I thought, meaning part of what the HOA claimed as common area was actually my land. The irony was delicious. Debbie had been trespassing on my land for months, accusing me of the very thing she was guilty of. Bob Henderson didn't waste a moment. He filed the paperwork to formally establish the correct boundaries and submitted a bill to the HOA for unauthorized use of my property. "She owes you rent money, Colton," he said with a grin that matched my own satisfaction. The following days brought news that Debbie had been evicted from her trailer for unpaid rent, a victim of her own reckless attempts to assert fake authority. Her mother, embarrassed by the public scandal, had cut ties, refusing to post bail when Debbie was arrested for violating the restraining order I had secured. The woman who'd tried to control my property was now homeless, living in her car and facing the very legal consequences she'd tried to escape. Justice, it seemed, had a way of circling back. The media storm that followed the tractor blockade and demolition turned our quiet corner of the world upside down. Channel 7's story went viral locally, sparking interest from farm magazines, property rights groups, and even documentary filmmakers. Suddenly, the Hayes Ranch was a symbol, a beacon for anyone standing up against petty bureaucrats and corrupt officials. Calls came in from people facing similar harassment, asking for advice, for hope. What had started as a personal property dispute blossomed into a movement. The tractors, once mere machines, had become emblems of resilience and the power of standing firm. The dirt road was back, the tractors rested in their garage, and peace slowly returned to the neighborhood. Property values rose, buoyed by positive publicity and renewed community spirit. Families talked about moving here because of the strong sense of solidarity they witnessed. The local tourism board approached me about adding the Hayes Ranch to a rural heritage trail, a chance to turn conflict into opportunity. And so what began as a fight against an overbearing HOA ended up breathing new life into a community that refused to be silenced. It was more than a victory. It was a legacy. Built one tractor roar and one family story at a time. The transformation of the Hayes Ranch from a battleground to a beacon of hope wasn't just a personal victory. It was the beginning of something much larger. Every morning, as I put on my grandfather's worn cap and stepped outside, I felt the weight of history and the promise of the future mingling in the cool air. Those three tractors, Big Blue, Green Machine, and Red Beast, sat proudly in their place of honor, no longer just farm equipment but powerful symbols of resilience. They weren't just metal and paint. They were the echoes of a man who refused to be pushed around, who taught me that property rights are sacred and that ordinary people can stand up to bullies if they have the courage to fight. The dirt road beneath my boots was exactly as my grandfather had built it, unchanged, untouchable, a ribbon connecting past to present, heritage to hope. And it was a reminder that some things are worth fighting for, no matter how official the clipboard looks or how loud the noise of bureaucracy gets. That simple stretch of dirt was a line drawn in the sand, a promise to future generations that no one would pave over our dreams or rewrite our history. I knew that the battle we'd fought had resonated beyond the fences of the ranch, sparking conversations and inspiring others to stand up for their own land and rights. The story of Debbie Riston, the fake HOA queen, had become a cautionary tale that spread like wildfire through rural communities and beyond. Her downfall wasn't just about one woman losing power. It was about exposing a system where authority is often wielded without accountability. State lawmakers took notice, and new legislation began to emerge, aimed at preventing such harassment campaigns and fraudulent claims of jurisdiction. Schools started using the Hayes Ranch story as an example in civics classes, teaching students that individual action can lead to meaningful change. Our fight became a blueprint, a symbol that even the smallest voices could move mountains if they refused to be silenced. But it wasn't just legal victories and legislation that defined this chapter. It was community. The Hayes Heritage Foundation was born out of this struggle, a nonprofit dedicated to preserving rural traditions, supporting young farmers, and educating the next generation about the importance of property rights and standing up to injustice. What had started as a solitary battle turned into a movement of solidarity, a place where people could find strength in shared values and a commitment to protecting what they love. The ranch grew, both in acreage and in spirit, supplying local restaurants, offering educational programs, and welcoming visitors who wanted to learn about resilience and heritage firsthand. And amid all this growth, life found its way back to joy and renewal. Sarah Chen, the veterinarian, who fell in love with the ranch and its values, became my partner and soon after, my wife. We held our wedding right here, between Big Blue and Green Machine, with red beasts celebrated not just our union but the triumph of principle over petty tyranny. It was a day full of laughter, tears, and the kind of hope that only comes from knowing you fought for something real and won. As we looked out over the land my grandfather had once worked, I felt his approval in every breeze and every heartbeat. The Hayes Ranch wasn't just a place anymore. It was a legacy, alive and thriving, ready for the next generation to carry on the fight and the dream. So, to anyone out there watching dealing with their own battles against faceless authorities and overreaching powers, remember this: you're not alone. The fight is hard, the road long, but the victory? It's worth every ounce of courage you can muster. Stand firm, know your rights, and never underestimate the power of persistence. And yes, sometimes the rumble of vintage American steel, to remind the world that some things, like family, land, and dignity, are sacred and worth protecting. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.